Why would he do that? How could she say something like that? These are the questions that come to almost everyone's mind when they observe behavior that does not fit what they deem appropriate for a given place and time. Fritz Heider championed this aspect of social psychology in the 1950s, and the study has been branching out ever since. I'm Angie Music of Murray State University, and the following is a word about the father of attribution theory and some of the psychologists who furthered the research. Fritz Heider was supposed to raise pigs for a living on his family's farm in Austria. This was the deal he made with his father, a wealthy architect from Hungary, in exchange for the privilege of auditing courses at Graz University rather than enrolling so he could skip the homework and exams. Thankfully for science, Heider was hooked by psychology and by the age of 24, a doctorate degree. After years of traveling Europe, studying and writing, he finally landed a professorship at Hamburg, but Germany was changing between the world wars, so he took the opportunity to conduct some research in Massachusetts in 1930. Now 34 years old, he married an American woman that same year, and they remained in the United States. His 1958 book, The Psychology of Interpersonal Relations, explaining the theories of attribution and balance, went on to become a milestone in social science and is published in many languages today. There is no research that has utilized Heider's common sense psychology between it has been so widely studied. However, the main scholar to take the theory and run with it was Harold Kelly. Kelly published several papers furthering the concept to include three key dimensions: consensus, distinctiveness, and consistency. Kelly's main contribution to the extension of Heider's model is called covariation theory, and it simply states an effect is attributed to the possible causes which covaries over time. Another theory is to expand upon Heider's work, also divided attribution into three key dimensions. Bernard Weiner called common sense psychology causal thinking. When he broke down into locus stability and controllability, his application of attribution theory deals more specifically with achievement, success, and failure. His work seems the attribution all the way through to emotions such as anger, pity, and shame. Essentially, builds upon Heider's theory by explaining how attribution go on to shape positive or negative emotions and how those emotions proceed to shape behavior. Finally, Hamilton and Sherman researched how attribution theories differ when it is being applied to an individual or to a group. Stereotypes are simply a form of naive psychology in which the observer assigns internal controllable causes to a group, especially a minority, much more readily than he would a single individual. They demonstrate that the consequences of social categorization is the perception of a uniformity among category members, especially the outgroup, where the observer might give the benefit of the doubt to an individual who has acted unkindly, attributing some internal, uncontrollable explanation. He will more likely attribute any unpleasant behavior of a member of minority to some negative disposition helped by the whole outgroup.
As human beings, we observe the actions of others and instinctively try to assign a why behind others' behaviors. This thought process is the main foundation of attribution theory. Originally created by Fritz Heider, attribution theory explains how people interpret events and behaviors and how they can affect relationships and future interactions. More specifically, attribution theory focuses on how individuals process and explain the causes of behavior. According to Loers, our brains are hardwired to seek stability and predictability. When we can assign a reason or give an explanation behind an action, we can create the stability we crave. This theory is mainly based on people gathering information from their environment to determine whether a behavior was caused by the personality of an individual or by the situation they were in. There are two causes of behavior we assign to people and their behaviors. The first being internal attributes, such as a person's characters, values, and beliefs. For example, if your friend is consistently late to plans, you may attribute it to them being inconsiderate. The other is external attributes like their environment or actual event where the behavior occurred. In the same scenario as before, you may think that your friend is just exhausted from work. These two categories just scratch the surface level of Heider's theory. Fritz Heider identified that our perceptions of intent is what determine which category a cause falls under. If a tree were to fall on your car, it would be an external event because there was no intent. But if a person hit your car, you will try to determine if the event was external or internal. Later on, Harold Kelly built on Heider's initial thoughts, and he introduced three types of information to help process what behaviors are internal or external: consensus, distinctiveness, and consistency. Consensus is found by asking, is this how others behave in a situation? If everybody is yelling at the same person, you'll blame the person getting yelled at. Distinctiveness is found by asking, is this how this person normally behaves? If the person never raises their voice usually, then again, you'll find that the person getting yelled at is to blame. Finally, consistency is found by asking, is this how they act every time they're in this situation? If the person yelling at this person yells at this person every time they see them, we again blame the person getting yelled at. Bernard Weiner also expanded on the theory by adding dimensions to help explain achievement and motivation behind behavior. He argued that our attribution are determined by whether an event was internal or external, if it's temporary or permanent, and if the outcome could have been changed. To truly understand attribution theory, we must understand why it fails often. We are not usually objective, and our attributions are affected by our biases. Lors notes that biases are not just mistakes, but built-in shortcuts to help us process information quickly but inaccurately. The fundamental attribution error occurs when we overestimate the effect of internal traits and ignore the situational factors when judging others. An example is when a person cuts in front of you, you may think of them as rude instead of thinking they may have a sick child waiting on medicine at home. The actor-observer bias is the fact that we often attribute others' behaviors to their character and attribute our own mistakes to situational factors. There's also the self-serving bias where we often blame our mistakes on the situation, but we take credit for any success we may have. In interpersonal relationships and communication, attributions are what determines whether a relationship is warm or cold. Research suggests that distress-maintaining attributions are a defining feature in failing relationships. In these relationships, a person can see a positive event as something manipulative or temporary, and a negative event as a permanent flaw. Oppositely, the relationships enhancing attributions provide a healthy dynamic. A person attributes a negative act as a temporary mistake and a positive act as stable and permanent. When we fully understand attribution theory, we can apply it to better our everyday lives. One of the main causes of arguments is fundamental attribution errors. By understanding fundamental attribution errors, we can recognize and ask ourselves what may be the cause of this behavior. This can lead us to better conflict resolution when utilized correctly. When we think this way, we shift our thoughts from accusing to trying to better understand. When an event happens, we can apply Kelly's model to find a constructive solution rather than a negative attribute. We can also learn to be more empathetic by utilizing the controllability depicted in Weiner's model. Using this model, we can recognize situational events, and instead of feeling angry, we can give support. This type of attributional retraining allows a person to build stronger and healthier relationships. Additionally, we can take more accountability and allow ourselves to grow. We can grow to be more mature and understanding by fighting against our self-serving bias. While it might feel better to blame a bad outcome on a mean boss, it would be more beneficial to recognize that this quarter you just didn't feel like putting in effort. By shifting to this mindset, we can hold ourselves accountable and do better in the future. Attribution theory can also be used as a way to minimize social anxiety. Anxiety often comes from the thought that others are often thinking of us in a negative and a hurtful way. When we recognize that everyone is prone to actor-observer bias, we can recognize that people around us are not invested in what we are doing, which can feel relieving. Thanks for listening.